Warning: some contents may be disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised. I'm a female, and this happened many years ago when I was 15. I live in a small Midwestern town that had very little crime, and I always felt safe even at night. I lived just a few blocks from downtown, and I would often walk or ride my bike there to pick up a soda, some candy, or on this particular evening, a pack of cigarettes. I know, I was way too young to be smoking, but there it is. So I get my cigs and I start walking back home. By this time, it was starting to get dark out, but that doesn't bother me at all. That is, until I pass a cross street and a guy steps out from the shadows and then starts following me. Even then, I wasn't scared. I was just aware that he was walking behind me and was getting closer. I sped up a little and so did he. Pretty soon, this guy is like 3 or 4 steps behind me, and then he asked me for a cigarette. Being a dumb kid who was raised to be polite, I gave him one. And then he asked for a light and I gave him that too. Then, I rapidly start walking away because this guy is starting to give me the creeps. He had long, greasy hair, and the way that he looked at me made me feel very uncomfortable. It was like he was looking at his dinner plate and was deciding what to eat first. So, I'm skedaddling up the street, which is now going up a big hill, where I hear the guy's footsteps starting to run towards me. I was already slightly out of breath from fast walking up this hill, and I know I'll never be able to outrun this guy. So I just keep on walking and hope that this guy will jog right past me. Well, nope. Next thing I know, the guy has grabbed me from behind with one arm around my waist, pinning both arms to my sides and the other around my neck. At this point, I wasn't even scared. I was mad. How dare he? I realize that we are on a residential street, so I tell the guy that I am going to start screaming my head off while I begin stomping on his feet as hard as I could. He hesitates for a moment, then lets me go and then jogs further up the hill, disappearing behind a bush at the top of the hill. I cross the street to walk on the opposite side of the bushes that he went behind, and I keep my eyes locked on those bushes all the way down the block. By now, I am only another block from home, and I break into a sprint and then dash home. Of course, I never told my parents about what happened because I was afraid of getting in trouble for smoking and that they wouldn't believe me. Turns out that several weeks later, this guy grabbed another girl and then beat and raped her. I didn't find this out until years later when I saw his picture in the paper for being on trial for rape. I think I was his first attempt, and he got scared when I fought back. I am so grateful that it was the fight response that kicked in for me that night, and it wasn't the freeze response. I was a very, very lucky kid. Before I start, I must say that I haven't told many people this, mostly because it was a very scary experience for me. This happened in Kelowna, Canada in the 80s. I was about 14 at that time, and I was babysitting at a neighbor's house while the parents were gone. They had a nice house, like most in the neighborhood, and it was right on the corner where 2 streets connected. My house was right outside a bus stop across from theirs. This happened pretty late at night in the winter, so it was dark out, maybe 11 or 12 at night. I was sitting on the couch when I thought I saw something out the back door. It was one of those glass doors that led to a porch. It was weird though because I couldn't see much. You know when the lights are on and it's dark out, so you can't see anything but black in your reflection? That's what I saw. But I could have sworn that it looked like something was there. So I got up and I walked close to the window. It definitely looked like something was there, but I couldn't see what it was. I got closer, and I still couldn't see it. I honestly should have just turned on the lights, but instead, I put my face right to the glass and I cupped my hands by my eyes to look out. Maybe about 1 inch from my face on the other side of the glass was a man. He looked tall and pale from what I could see, and he was staring at me very scarily. Keep in mind, he would have been watching from the backyard. And naturally, I jumped back and I let out a short scream. And being stupid teenage me, I didn't call the cops. I called my parents instead. My father then came over to take a look. There were still footprints in the front and backyard, and I don't remember much after that because it just felt like a very unreal experience. You never expect this stuff to happen to you until it does. Anyways, I just hope that you enjoyed this story because I sure didn't enjoy experiencing it. Hi there. So this was something that happened to me when I was traveling alone. I had lost my partner of 8 years after a long battle with an illness that they had, which caused me to take some time off to try and heal and find myself again. I decided that during the spring break, I would move from Mass back to my home state of Oklahoma to be close to my mother again. On my way there, I made some planned stops at places that my partner and I enjoyed or were memorable for us as a way to honor them. One of those places was a state park. We were both avid outdoorsy people and we loved camping, hiking, and just being one with the nature. And this particular park had strong memories, so I knew that I had to go. Once I got there, I called my mom to let her know that I was there. I then stuffed my phone and keys in my backpack, and then I marched on. The sight was beautiful, especially early mornings in spring, when you could still see the dew sitting on top of the grass and kind of hanging above the rocks. I was able to just take in the sights and let anything out that I needed. A woman I was passing actually snapped a great picture of me by an overhang that I still have to this day. I saw a few people on my hike who were all willing to share their stories and wished me well on my journey. It truly was a therapeutic experience for me. I was and always will be a very giving person and willing to help those in need that I come across too. So when I made eye contact with a man that seemed a bit distraught or maybe just overwhelmed, I stopped and asked if he was okay. When I approached him sitting on the edge of this cliff with his feet dangling, I noticed a very strong alcoholic smell. He said he was fine but just asked if I had water. I always carried an extra bottle, so I just gave him the whole thing, telling him to keep it. If that man was out there drinking, he was going to need the water. I don't know how many people would have stopped for him, let alone give him water, so I did. He thanked me, and we had a small conversation. He told me he used to go there with his parents when he was younger, and that he was just struggling at that time. I don't want to make it too mushy, but I tried my best at a small inspirational speech for him, to which he seemed to cheer up a bit. He then asked me if I was single or if I wanted to go get drinks, to which I politely declined. I didn't want to bring up my partner, but I just said that I wasn't looking for anyone at that time. He shrugged it off and seemed to handle it well by laughing. We then shook hands and wished each other well, and I carried on my path. At one point, I stopped at a small stream and splashed some water on my face and rested. And while sitting there, I started getting a feeling like I was being watched. This was a bit off the path, so I rarely saw people over there. I looked around and I confirmed that no one was around, so I assumed that it was either just me or maybe there was an animal. I was, after all, in their territory, so I decided that it would be best to move along. I got back to the path, and after a bit, that following feeling came back. I again looked behind me and I didn't see anyone, but the feeling just wouldn't go away. My instincts were starting to kick in and overwhelm me, so I sporadically made the decision to break into a run to see what would happen. It was probably a stupid idea if it was an animal, but I really just wanted the feeling to go away. And after a bit, I slowed down to catch my breath and I again looked around. I was not seeing anyone, but this time, I heard heavy breathing. That path is not easy if you don't take steep inclines like that on a regular basis. So, I looked around a little closer and walked back towards a large boulder. On the other side was the same guy that I saw earlier. When I saw him, I didn't know what to do other than ask if he was okay again. He again chuckled and said yes, but seemed like he meant it more this time. I asked him if he was following me in a joking manner, to which he replied that he wasn't intentionally, but just wanted to catch up to me to thank me again because it meant a lot to him. I told him that it was no big deal at all and I was glad to help. And after some awkward standing around, I then said that I had to get going. He waved me on and I headed out thinking that it was a bit awkward, but at least that was solved and over with. But as I made my way to a part the loops around, I started getting the same feeling of being watched. I was a bit less worried this time, expecting it to be the same guy again, but saying that I was a bit annoyed sounds too harsh, but I'm not sure how else to put it. I wanted this experience to release any emotions that I had been holding back. Yeah, I had stopped and talked to a few people, but I wasn't really here to meet new people. I wanted to be able to continue this journey on my own. I continued on this time, thinking maybe if I didn't stop to pay attention to him, then I wouldn't have any more run-ins. Yet, because this circled around, we ended up walking towards each other. This time, I just smiled at him and I tried to keep walking. But I was startled when he grabbed my arm. I never experienced anything like this, so I didn't know what to do but look at him. He told me again that what I said really meant a lot to him and he wanted to make it up to me. I told him that it wasn't necessary as I was just being nice. I tried pulling my arm away as I said this, but he only held it tighter. I started becoming a bit scared for obvious reasons, and he picked up on this as he looked at me, smiled, and asked, "Are you scared?" That made me sick to my stomach. There was no one else around in this secluded area but us. What was he planning? Why would he even say something like that? While choking back tears, I managed to just say please let go of my arm. After a few more seconds of staring at me and smiling, he finally let go and started laughing. I didn't waste any more time and I quickly ran. I was familiar with the path and I knew that I still had a bit to go before I got back to the entrance. But I remembered that there was a small opening in the trees to a field with a few benches where families typically stopped and then took pictures or had lunch. I was praying that I would run into some people and that hopefully I would be able to just walk near them so I wasn't alone. And thankfully I did come across the spot and there were a few people there. I tried to calm down and look like I was just there to rest, as I didn't want anyone to be worried about me. I sat up at the bench and I looked around worried that he would show up and then cause another scene, but thankfully he never did. After some time, I was able to calm down and try to enjoy the last bit of my trek. I was obviously upset. This was supposed to be a time for me to heal and then move on with my life. And while this was pretty terrifying, I refused to let this ruin it for me. I gathered myself and I headed back to the entrance by myself. I started a brisk walk until I was back into my jog, until I finally reached the entrance. I stopped by the restrooms to freshen up before I was ready to head back to my car. But as I exited the restroom, I, of course, would make eye contact with this same guy heading into the shop. But he looked slightly different. He had lost the old dirty jacket that he was wearing, and the jeans he was wearing now looked like it had been cut at the knees. Could he have changed into them? Quite possibly, but since they seemed jagged and uneven, they looked intentionally and sporadically cut. And of course, as soon as he noticed me, he stopped and turned like he was about to walk towards me. This time, I wasn't going to be the scared little girl. I rolled my eyes and I immediately turned around to walk to my car with my keys clenched between my fingers, and I heard someone shout, "Hey!" from behind me, but I didn't stop. I didn't even turn around until I heard the footsteps getting faster, causing me to run as well. I managed to get to my car, get in, lock it as he finally caught up and started pulling on my car handle. When he realized that it was locked, he became enraged. He kept screaming to open the door and he was banging on my window and kicking it. It didn't last long before a ranger noticed and came rushing up to us as well, but he then took off. They didn't catch him, but he did stupidly run backwards into the park, so he would have to leave eventually. The ranger asked me what happened and I agreed to stay to tell an officer. Throughout this whole time, they never found the guy, so I ended up leaving and giving them my contact information if they had any other questions for me. I left there, relieved for multiple reasons. Relieved that I would never see that man again, but also relieved that I made it through the trail alone for the first time. It felt like a weight being lifted off me, like I was being tested and I passed it, and it would just make me stronger. I even got a call from the officer telling me that they did catch the guy, and since the rangers saw him, I didn't have to come back to identify him. They also told me that he had warrants, so he went back with them anyway. Overall, I felt like the trip was successful and I was already feeling better. I'm not going to say it made me more suspicious of people, as I still look for the best in others, but I am also mentally stronger and know how to handle situations better, both physically and mentally. And to the guy that stalked me that day, I hope that you are truly doing better. Yesterday, I was at the mall around closing time. I was browsing for some cosmetic products in the makeup aisle with my friend until I realized that there was this one strange man who had like a mischievous ass look on his face, whom kept walking past the same aisle that I was in. 5 to 6 different times, he was staring at us every single time. I don't think anything of it yet besides a weird vibe, and me and my friend tried to test something out by going into a whole different section of the store. When we went to where the birthday cards were, I saw him in the corner of my eye, so I told my friend to keep walking. We then reached the other end of the store where the pet supplies are, and he was still there. There, cornering the main entrance of the aisle. At that point, I whispered to my friend and we immediately speed walked out. And when we did, I still saw him following us, so I turned around to speak up, but when I did, he was just staring at me. I didn't break eye contact because I wanted to say something to this man, but my mind went blank. Once we reached the checkout, and I see he's waiting right behind us, but not quite at the checkout. He was behind and beside the entrance of the checkout. At this point, my friend noticed and I was about to freak the fuck out. We stood there for around 15 to 20 minutes waiting to see if he would leave, and he never did. So, after that time markup was up, we decided to just hold hands and then run up the escalators and make our way to the upper level exit. We both were running for our dear lives, but once I went through the gate in front of the exit, my friend immediately grabbed me back and I didn't realize why. Until seeing the guy had somehow got into the door before us, which had to have been impossible because we ran before he did. We never even saw him running or heard anyone running. However, we did get escorted out by an older group of men and women who overheard me and my friend freaking out about the situation. They confronted him, but I never got to hear anything any of them said. He asked the group of people, "Are you sure you guys are with these people?" And after they confirmed, he left, and someone a part of the group said something about him allegedly lying about being some sort of undercover employee. So, I've been listening to scary story channels for ages, and I've always been a skeptical believer in all the stories. I feel like some of them are certainly fiction, but others sound more true than others. But I've always looked at them all as probably made up. But that changed recently because I had something happen to me that I would have listened to and immediately thought that it was fiction. It's not super eventful, it's actually pretty straightforward, but it was seriously weird and is legitimately the stuff of nightmares. It was a regular Wednesday night to begin with, and I had woken up somewhere around 3 to what I would say was the most annoying feeling in the back of my throat. Have you ever woken up in the middle of the night with your throat feeling like the Sahara and you absolutely have to go downstairs and down half a gallon of water? Yeah, it was one of those nights. It was my own fault though. I had eaten a whole bag of pretzels, and I knew that the amount of sodium that I had consumed was probably close to fatal. I grumbled to myself, not wanting to leave the comfort of my bed. But after a few minutes of trying to ignore it and go back to sleep, I sighed and I relented. I stumbled my way down the stairs in the dark, nearly eating the hardwood floor in the hallway at the bottom. I made my way to the kitchen and grabbed a glass from the cabinet and then walked over the sink. Now, like a lot of kitchens, there's a big window over it that faces out in the backyard, and at night, it's pretty much pitch black. There's a small light on the shed that's on the far left side, but that's about it. Normally, I wouldn't even bother looking out back, or would and wouldn't think twice about seeing nothing. But this time, something actually did catch my eye. Right there, in the middle of my backyard was a figure. Well, not a figure like something I couldn't make out. It was a person, just standing there. Seeing someone in my yard was enough to startle me in and of itself. But the creepiest part was that this person was wearing a mask. This mask was terrifying. It had a weird twisted jaw with spiked teeth that was stretched out, and the eyes were hollow and dark, and really, it was just terrifying. Now, my brain made me stand there and just kind of stare at this person wearing a weird mask that was just standing in my backyard for several moments. At first, I thought that I was hallucinating or dreaming, or that I was just seeing something else and only thinking that it was a person with a mask. But as I sipped my water, watching this person watching me, my mind finally clicked into drive and I realized that I was staring at a person wearing a creepy mask standing in my backyard. Like, this was not a normal thing to see at 3 in the morning. I started freaking out at this point and I dashed back up the stairs to put on my pants and grab my phone on my way down. I had 911 already dialed and I ran back to my window. But I was surprised to see that the person was gone. The backyard was back to being empty and there was zero trace of this masked person. I already dialed 911 at this point, and the operator was asking me where the emergency was, and I didn't want to just say, "Oh, never mind, I'm just crazy." So I explained to her that I saw a person in a mask in my backyard, but that they seemed to have left. She was a bit confused, but I explained that I saw them, and when I went to grab my phone, they had disappeared. And after explaining things like the idiot that I am, she reassured me that they would send a unit to drive around the neighborhood. After I got off the phone with her, I stayed downstairs and I just kind of watched out the front window, feeling paranoid and creeped out. After a while, the police had pulled up to my house and knocked on my door, and I opened it to speak with them. The officer asked me a few questions, mostly about what I saw. I explained to him the guy with the mask, and I described what they were wearing to the best of my abilities. I could tell by the look on the officer's face that he was as confused as I was, and he even said that it was really strange, and then asked if it was okay that they look around on my property. I told them that I had no issue with that. After a few minutes, they had actually come back to the door, and the officer asked me if my gate had been broken, and I looked at him like, "Huh?" He motioned for me to come out, and sure enough, my gate was busted. The fence was wooden and the gate was fairly large, and the latch had been completely pulled from the wood, like pried out with a crowbar or something. I told him that no, that it wasn't broken like that before. And he then told me to stay there while he checked the backyard out real quick, just in case. They looked around for a few moments, and when he came back, he asked me if what he'd found was the mask that I had seen. It was. It was that same creepy-ass mask that the person was wearing. After that, they seemed to take this a bit more seriously and asked me if they could come in and if I could give them an official statement. They then came in, took my statement, and they gave me the report information for the insurance company since the gate was destroyed, and then they left, telling me to call them again if I saw anything else. I have no idea if they ever found anything past this, as they never contacted me about it. A couple of days have passed and I kind of relaxed about what had happened. Until one day when I came home from work and I saw a crumpled piece of paper in front of my door. It was just a normal looking paper, crumpled, nothing too old or creepy. So I decided to open it up, and on that paper was a single line that drained all the blood from my face. It said, "I'm always watching you." I know that this sounds like some creepy event from some dumb B-rated horror movie, and I would have had that same thought had I read or heard the story. But I lived it. I did contact the police and gave them the note, but nothing further has happened since. What did happen was enough to be terrifying to me though. I was paranoid, and I would watch the backyard sometimes an entire night. Now, when I go to bed, I double-check all the locks, and the gate that I had installed is reinforced way better than the old one. I have no idea how they pried the gate open or why they did it, but they did. I also don't know what they meant about the sentence that they wrote on the paper. Are they pranking me? Do I have a stalker? Is this some kind of sick joke that someone is playing on me? I don't know. But I have also installed a floodlight that is motion activated that shines into the backyard, just in case that I wake up at 3 in the morning again and I feel the need to look outside. My name is Tracy, and I'm 24 years old, and I live in the bustling city of Seattle, Washington. I have always loved the vibrant energy of the city, with its coffee culture and the ever-present drizzle that somehow adds to its charm. My story begins in the place that I find solace in, Starbucks. It was a typical rainy afternoon. I decided to treat myself to a caramel macchiato at the Starbucks on Pike Street. Since I wasn't in a hurry, I grabbed my coffee and I found a cozy seat by the window, just enjoying the ambience and watching people bustle by. As I sipped my coffee, a guy approached me. He looked to be in his late 20s with dark hair, a set of piercing blue eyes, and a chiseled jawline. He wore a well-fitted leather jacket and smelled of subtle masculine cologne. He asked if he could join me, and I couldn't help but be drawn to his charming smile and confident demeanor. Being single and, ready to mingle, I was open to new experiences, so I said yes. His name was Alex, and we immediately hit it off. He was witty, kind, and seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me. We exchanged numbers before parting ways. We started texting, and later on, Alex and I started going on dates, and each one felt like a dream. We had picnics at Gasworks Park, enjoying romantic dinners at quaint little restaurants, and we took long walks along the waterfront. He was always attentive, holding open doors for me and making sure that I was comfortable. He had a way of making me feel special, and I soon found myself falling for him. Our dates were filled with laughter and deep conversations. He seemed perfect, the kind of guy that I have always dreamed of. And after a few months, we decided to make things official. Alex became my boyfriend, and for the first 3 months, he was everything that I could ever want. He was sweet, caring, and always made time for me. I felt like the luckiest girl in the world. But after 3 months, things started to change with Alex. He became cold and distant. When we went on dates, he would often ignore me and he's just glued to his phone. Conversations that once flowed so easily became strained and awkward. I tried to brush it off thinking that he might just be stressed with work, but his behavior persisted and it was really hurting me. At the same time, he also became controlling. Ironic, right? Whenever I went out with friends, he would bombard me with calls and texts, accusing me of cheating or lying about my whereabouts. The sweet, attentive guy that I fell for seemed to disappear, replaced by someone that I barely recognize. Yet, after these episodes, he would suddenly shower me with affection, apologizing profusely, giving me flowers, gifts, and then promising to change. But then, after everything is alright, he then goes back to being cold and distant, and then the cycle begins again. I just couldn't get it, like if I was with him, I would get ignored, but when I wasn't with him, he would turn into this controlling, clingy monster. Well, I reached my breaking point and I decided to end the relationship. Alex couldn't understand what he did wrong though. He became angry during the breakup. He was screaming and he was throwing things around my apartment. I had never seen him so enraged. He broke the picture frame and knocked over a lamp. Like, what the hell? This was a side to him that I was never expecting at all. A good thing that he was showing it this early though. But at that moment, I was extremely terrified, so I called the police. The police then arrived and managed to calm him down, and then they escorted him out of my apartment. Things were silent for a week, and I hoped that that was the end of it. All that I had to do right now was to move on and let go of him. But guess what? I was wrong. Alex showed up at my door with flowers, asking me to take him back. I explained that it was over and that I couldn't continue in a relationship that made me feel unsafe. He threw the flowers on the ground and just stormed out, and I thought that that would be the last that I would see of him. And you know what? I was wrong again. Alex began stalking me. He called and texted me constantly, begging for another chance, and then turning angry when I didn't respond. I started seeing his car parked near my apartment, and he would follow me to work and other places I frequented. I was hanging out with friends once, and we saw him sitting and drinking at another table all by himself, just staring at me. This guy that I once fell in love with was seriously freaking me out. One night, I was walking home from the grocery store when I noticed him trailing behind me. My heart pounded with fear as I quickened my pace. I was so desperate to get home and just to get away from him. I felt like I was living in a nightmare. I was constantly looking over my shoulder and feeling unsafe in my own city. The situation reached its climax though one night when I was asleep. I woke up to the sound of banging on my door. I checked the time, and it was 2 a.m. It was Alex outside. He was shouting and he was demanding to be let in. He said that he just wanted to talk, but I was terrified. So I grabbed my phone ready to call the police when I saw red and blue lights flashing through the window. The police arrived, and it turned out that my neighbors had called them after hearing the disturbance. They took Alex away and I filed a police report. The ordeal left me shaken, but I was grateful for my neighbors and the swift response of the police. In the aftermath, I had to file a restraining order against him. I also took more steps to protect myself. I changed my phone number, I installed security cameras, and I took self-defense classes. If I had ignored the red flags in my relationship, things could have ended much, much worse. So, yeah, that's my story. My encounter with a charming stranger turned stalker taught me a valuable lesson about trust, safety, and resilience. I hope my experience serves as a cautionary tale and offers some comfort to others who might be going through similar situations. Please stay safe and always trust your instincts. And here's the riddle for this video. Hello everyone, it's your creepy sister here. Thank you so much for watching the video. I really appreciate it. I would also like to give some extra love to my Patreon members, my channel members, and also my tippers. Thank you so much. If you would like to extend a little bit more support for the channel, don't forget to leave a like and a comment down below. If you would like to become a Patreon member, a channel member, a tipper, or even to buy merch, check out the links in the description below. Again, thank you. And I hope you stay scared, because your fear feeds me.